I see that my colleague from Washington State is here. Would she consider, I would welcome a question if you have one.
Mr. President, I rise to ask the senator from Oregon a question. I appreciate my Northwest colleague being here to bring attention to these important issues. And so much has transpired in the last few weeks, and so I just appreciate the fact that you are trying to bring part of the awareness. If we made a long list, there'd be many, many things here in this list of authoritarianism that we do not like, and appreciate you bringing specific attention, although I do find some musings that people find a bicycle protest somewhat threatening, which it's just not you know, we're kind of famous for our bicycle events in Northwest, so don't know why somebody finds that threatening when the authoritarianism is really the threat. So, but I have been so involved with my colleague Senator Grassley in making a really important point, and that is the president is abusing his power on tariffs. When you think about the actions of proposing tariffs, this is exactly why people said we don't want kings to have this authority. Why? Because it's such an important constitutional authority given to Congress. It is not something that we think that the President of the United States should have to usher in economic impact in this dramatic way. And the IEEPA tariffs, the lower courts have already said, yes, we don't think that he has this authority. He's been abusing this authority. Now he's going to try to say there's other emergency powers, and hopefully the courts will continue to do their job. But when I think about all of the things he's done, and lots of them are big issues, to me this one, to basically wield an economic impact on the cost of affordability for Americans, for housing, for food, for transportation cost, a whole myriad of things, when it's only the authority of Congress to do this. I think of how big this economic stick is that he is wielding. So all we've said here collectively, bipartisan group of senators, is that you should, if you think these things are so great, you should come to the Congress. But the constitutional authority is that only Congress has this authority. So I think it's a very dangerous precedent. I think it, you know, in a global economy with a lot of economic activity to be had, I don't think it's a good idea to have somebody in the office of the presidency acting as if these tariff policies are their domain. And clearly, the cost of this on goods and services, particularly those that are really, really hurting us, like I said, affordable housing and things of that nature, are really the impacts. And I don't know to what degree, sorry to say I didn't stay up with you and watch all night, so I don't know what degree you covered tariffs, but I don't know what you think about this particular point in this debate of yours about the authoritarian power and how much is being abused on tariffs.
I so appreciate the question from my colleague from Washington State, and I'm heartened to hear of your work across the aisle with Senator Grassley to try to address this question of tariffs. You know, the very first bill ever considered by the U.S. Senate was a tariff bill. So you can imagine our 13 colonies, they got their 26 senators, they're gathered in a fairly small space, and they're going, no, I want for a jug of the tariff on a jug of molasses to be this, and on sugar to be that, and so on and so forth. And over the course of 3 weeks, they reached agreement on a couple hundred products, and the one person who kept notes through this whole thing, a daily diary, got frustrated by, oh, well, now we're going back to the same product we considered 3 days earlier. But in 3 weeks, they considered a whole lot. But the point is, it was Congress that was deciding the tariffs. This was an inherent power to the president. And there is no law that has delegated power to the president to do a tariff. Tariffs have been done by law. That means they are a bill that occurs here, and it is a bill that becomes the actual tariff when it's signed by a president. But the President, we've never delegated that power, and I'm not even sure if we tried to, if the court would say you could delegate it, because the court sometimes says you have responsibilities as Congress that you can't delegate. You cannot delegate the design of how much money goes to certain programs and whether or not they can be canceled. You cannot delegate that. And so here we are with this enormously destructive tariff policy. Now, count me in if there is a slight tariff on goods from very low wage, low environmental, low labor standards countries. Count me in to encourage a little more of the factories to be in the U.S. But for people to make investment decisions, put those factories in the U.S., you have to have a stable tariff regime. You can't have the tariffs up one side and down the next. And so no companies are making decisions about building factories right now. They may say, well, for a few months, because there's this big whopping tariff on Vietnam, maybe we should build a factory here, but wait, that tariff may change. And oh, it did change on Vietnam. And think about the chaos that comes in our foreign policy, because here's Vietnam, a country that we are trying to induce to be a significant manufacturing partner with us rather than products coming from China, and to be a force in the region to counterbalance China to somewhat, and we treat them in an arbitrary and capricious way. Well, there goes years and years and years, decades really, of rebuilding a relationship with them. Or Brazil, the president just says, I don't like the fact that their strong-arm former president is being put in prison for trying to overthrow their democracy. I mean, really? Okay, but you're going to put a tariff on them and 50% tariff? Or last week it was going to be 100% tariff on China after China said they were going to control their strategic minerals. It's chaos. And what I heard from small businesses yesterday, they said we've got two problems that are making Main Street into Pain Street. And the first is the tariffs. They are affecting either the inputs for our products or how we sell our products, or just the uncertainty that is causing people to buy less. And all of that's a problem. And they said the second problem is most of us buy our insurance on the exchange, and because of the not so beautiful, what I like to call the big ugly betrayal of a bill, the average cost of that's going to double across America. And this one owner said, I think I understood him to say he had 4 employees and that he'd talked to 3 of them. They had each said, I'm not going to buy insurance. I looked it up on the exchange, the price has doubled or done something like that. I'm not doing it. I'm going to take the risk. And we know where that leads. That leads to people not going to the doctor when they need to go. It leads to small problems being big problems. It begins to big problems being treated in the emergency room, the most expensive place. So I do think the tariffs are absolutely, we need to reclaim that power here in Congress and being rationality and a theory behind it, a theory that will help make America more prosperous, but not this crazy fluctuating up and down that leaves everybody struggling to know what plant should they grow in their field, what product should they produce in their factory, should they produce more, should they warehouse them, or should they shut down? I mean, no one knows.
Mr. President, if I could, the senator from Oregon, if he had time for another question on this point, you know that the Pacific Northwest is a big export economy. We have many ports. People may not know, but we probably export a significant amount of soybeans. And I don't know if the senator is aware that this is a crisis now. These growers, particularly in the Midwest, are on their heels over this. This is having huge economic impact, and it's a constitutional authority by Congress. And instead of our colleagues dealing with this authority and dealing with the fact that their own constituents are getting run over, they're still, ignoring the fact that the president is abusing these powers. So I don't know how much you're aware of this, but it is these kinds of activities that lose you shelf space, go to some other country, and then when you try to get it back, the country's already in business with somebody else. So this is affecting our growers across the United States. It's time for our colleagues to admit that this is an abuse of power and help us rein it back in. And so I so appreciate your efforts here to talk about authoritarianism, and I appreciate your comments on tariffs specifically. But this is, one side of it is the consumer impact, and the other side of it is the economic impact to growers who wonder why they send people here to vote and take care of their interests if you're going to have somebody at the White House who's just going to run over them. And I hope that we can continue to emphasize this. And of course, obviously, on the healthcare cost, we put out a report now I think 4 weeks ago, about the high cost of healthcare being implemented because of the lack of the ACA tax credits. But oh, by the way, guess what was in that report? That tariffs were also having an impact on the cost of healthcare. So it is impacting us on healthcare, the very underlying issue of why we're here and trying to get some relief for the American consumer as now they start to see these bills and see the choices that they're going to have. But tariffs are affecting our economy in a very significant way, and it's time for our colleagues to say this is not the authority. They have a chance to sign on to our bill. They certainly could sign on. There's 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans. They certainly could sign on and say that they support that. I don't see anybody on the other side of it making a case that the president has this constitutional authority. It's more that they're just silent. And America needs to know that our economy is being hurt by tariffs, and it's an abuse of power by the White House. So thank you.
I appreciate my colleague's question regarding particularly the soybeans. And my understanding is that China was a major consumer of soybeans, and they have bought exactly 0 beans. Massive, massive amount in the past. But now when you go from huge tonnage, ships and ships full of soybeans, and then you drop down to 0, wow, the overproduction of soybeans, how do I, price drops on them, what do I do, how do I store them, they're going to go bad, where else in the world can I find a market, can I get China back when all this fuss ends? And meanwhile, Brazil is stepping up in the soybean world to provide that supply, and once you lose that relationship and that trust, and the personal connections, it's very hard to get those customers back. So I understand the distress for our farmers. And just one example how the capricious tariffs, the massive fluctuations are so devastating. And you mentioned in your question that there is also the issue of how tariffs can affect health care. And I have heard that tariffs are being placed on a lot of the ingredients that come in, including from China, to make our medicines, and therefore that drives up the cost of drugs as a factor. That's at least one connection. I suspect there's others, maybe the cost of wheelchairs or medical devices, I'm sure more. So Washington is an extraordinary exporting state, coast on the Pacific Rim, as is Oregon. We're about the same size. We have kind of a friendly, competitive relationship between our 2 states, but we have the same issues, and it means that we often work together to try to solve those issues for our region of the country. And I thank so much for your leadership.